Will you come forward and be recognized and deliver the commencement address?
So hello, friends and family. On behalf of the graduates, my colleagues, staff, all my bosses, welcome to our campus. Thank you for being here. I was really tickled and honored to be asked to speak to you today, especially because you make my life possible. Not only you students, but all the people who support you in being here. That makes my life possible, and I get to say thank you in person. So thank you very much. I want to say a few words to you today about this place you've been in, and I want to say a few words shorter about where you're going. So don't worry, when I get to the middle, it's not doubling in length because the second part is shorter. So we treat graduation, we're in this habit of treating graduation like an achievement that amazes us. You get to the top of this mountain and we're looking up at you and we say, we cannot believe you got to the top of that mountain. And it certainly is an achievement. But the truth is we are not amazed. We knew you could do it. We thought you could do it, and your loved ones thought you could do it. They knew you had it all along. That's why we admitted you. That's why they supported you. So in that way, you justified the faith. And in another way, what you did, what you've achieved here, is you've actually met a social obligation. Now, that itself is cause for celebration and great satisfaction and pride, because it's not easy to do what society asks of us all the time. But the greater achievement is if and when, somewhere along that way, that thing that was a social expectation became your own expectation of yourself. It clicks in for different people at different times, but you know you're feeling it in that moment when you've just hit send on a paper that you're really proud of, or you've just sat down after giving a presentation that where you really put yourself on the line, or you stand up after you just smoked an exam where you knew the material cold because you really, really studied for this one. That feeling, that very feeling, is your education working, is you meeting your own expectations and owning them for yourself. And if you got that, you got the best thing that you can get out of higher education. Now, for graduate students, the social expectation is a little bit different. For graduate students, see, for when you're an undergraduate, if you had dropped out of college as an undergraduate, that would be, there's a social stigma attached to that still, right? People would be polite, but they would say, oh, okay, I guess you know what you're doing. That's probably the best you would get. But if you drop out of graduate school, people will actually congratulate you. People will say, it's like being in the army in the 19th century. When people deserted from that army, other people, civilians, thought that was a reasonable response to the mistake of having enlisted in the first place. It's also kind of like if you announce that you break up with your significant other and all your friends kind of breathe a sigh of relief and think, we never thought that was a good idea in the first place. So grad students are always kind of on the spot to defend themselves and to defend their decision of why they went back to school. You went out of your way for this. You had to have your own expectation of yourself. And you have to explain why you chose to truly master a field of study. And that gives you a special role in kind of explaining the academy to outside the academy and explaining outside the academy to within the academy. And when you do that, when you're an ambassador for the academy, one thing, maybe the most important thing that I hope you'll tell people, is that this was real. University life, was real. You know how people like to tell you, whether you're grad or undergrad, people like to tell you, it's not going to be like this when you get out in the real world, right? It's not going to be like this in the real world. It's, you won't get away with that in the real world. I hate that. First of all, yes, you can. You can get away with it in the real world. The real world is full of malfeasance and corner cutting in the American workplace, so you can get away with it. But if you united your commitment to your talent here, if you got that feeling of making your own expectations and pegging your enthusiasms to them, you won't want to just get by with it. That's your education at work. But more to the point, this is actually literally the real world. Physical walls, human beings, the whole thing. This is the real world, and it's a reason that kind of people say that it's not the real world is that sometimes we become obsessed with the idea of education as preparation for later life. And it starts very early. Just like there are people who will tell you, it's not going to be like this in the real world. There were people who in high school told you, wait till you get to college. Look out, it's not going to be like that in college. And people in middle school telling you, we're preparing you for college. It's preparation. Even in the fourth grade, your fourth grade teacher might have told you, you're not going to get away with this in fifth grade. They take no crap in fifth grade. Right? So you can spend your whole life thinking as if you're preparing for something else. And what I would argue to you is that actually you're losing sight of it being a living experience while it's happening. When you are studying, just studying, and I don't mean just, but I mean other people would say just studying, you are more alive than almost anything else you can be doing. You can actually feel your mind expanding. You can feel these little floating bits of learning that you have actually sort of coalesce into connections that create pathways of logic that blow confusion away. And it's such a satisfying feeling that it makes you wonder, why would anyone want to say, this is not happening in the real world? Well, in part, okay, there's some people who would say, well, because they have a certain student in mind. This isn't all of you. It's their stereotype of a student. And that student, it's true for a lot of people, they're not paying a mortgage. They're not worried about losing their job. Their teenaged offspring is not putting them through the ringer. And people would say they're not in the real world. Well, I get that point, but I'm not saying that you have lived. My point is you're living your life, not that you've lived your whole life. There's more experiences out there. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who say it's not real because they resent the existence of the university in the first place. I have in mind people who are making kind of rants on, in comment sections to articles. I have in mind some of our less imaginative elected leaders who are really bothered, really driven insane a little bit by the fact that this place, the university, is not under more direct pressure from profit making. It bothers them that you're not serving someone else's profit and you are not real to them unless and until you are serving someone else's profit. So this is a little bit mind-blowing for your less imaginative capitalist, that this is both a place that is real, part of the real world, but also not for profit. These people behind me are not shareholders. They're trustees. They don't take money home at the end of the day. They have been entrusted with something. So you've already heard that word today, trustees, but have you thought about ever who is doing the trusting? Who actually entrusted them with something? At a public university, it's obvious, right? It's the public, me, you, New Jersey, America is doing the trusting. At a private university, it's really the same idea, except it was constructed by private citizens. This university was founded in 1933. So if we were upstairs in the classroom right now, I would say, okay, so what was happening in 1933? But you passed that test, and you're good now. It's class of 2018, graduated, you're good. So I'll tell you, it's the Great Depression, you knew that. In the middle of the worst economic calamity of modern history, some people in central New Jersey said, what we really need is more people having higher education. We need another institution to do that. How great was that? It was so optimistic. Every instinct at that time said withdraw, retrench, pull back, but these people invested in the people of the region and now the people of the whole country who can come to Monmouth. You should be very proud of that founding year of 1933. So they entrusted that public-minded idea to people, and those people entrusted it to the people down the line, to the people on this stage. They also entrusted it to you in a looser sense. Some of you may be up here amongst the trustees at some point in your lives, but even if you're not, you are the bearer of that good idea. And it's a good perspective to keep in mind because soon you're going to start getting letters from us And if you're like me, the first few years, you're gonna open the letter, and you say, what? The college wants more money? Of all the nerve. You know, you're gonna be, but we're not asking for ourselves, or they're not asking for themselves. The trustees don't pocket that money and go have a big party. That money goes back in. It goes back into the grounds, it goes into the flowers, it goes into the laboratories, into the studios, it goes into the library, which is our crucial vessel for transmitting generation to generation knowledge. It goes into the air conditioning, which is not to be underrated on a day like today. It goes into the physical fitness center, which I'm gonna start using soon. And it goes into the salaries of the people who advise you and teach you and the people who clean up and maintain this place. So whether you're a donor or not, though, stand up for this community. Stand up not only for this community, but for all communities like it. Because whether you call it a city on a hill or a campus by the shore, it is an example of a community that enriches the lives of the people who are part of it, and maybe, just maybe, the rest of the real world would be better off if more things were held in public trust rather than fewer. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just say a word about where you're headed next. So part of the role of the history professor is that you get to impart some historical perspective to things. Right, so when somebody says, this is the worst thing that has ever happened, history professors can say, oh, no, it's not. But I don't just mean, that everything is better when compared to the bubonic plague. That's kind of like a minimum basic standard, right? I mean actually something better than that. I mean that by some measures, the whole world is not going to hell in a handbasket, or if it is, then travel by handbasket is much slower than maybe we thought. Public health is improving over the long haul in this country. Leisure time is increasing. We are better educated. Crime has fallen. Even arguably the deadliness of our wars is less than what it once was. So you get to kind of say those things and sit back. The point is not to be complacent about any of those issues. The point is to be able to distinguish a problem from a crisis. There is one thing, though, that I see on the horizon that does make me think it's historically dangerous, and that is the division of the United States into two political camps that are dwelling in separate realities. It's not the division that is the problem. Democracy is supposed to deal with division. We've always had division. That's what democracy's for, is to resolve divisions. The problem is living in separate realities. If one side thinks the other side's information, all of it, is automatically propaganda merely because it's their information, that's not tenable over the long haul, because sooner or later, that problem will go to a crisis. There will be a political outcome that one side does not accept, and that's a recipe for political violence. We do not have in this country a get out of civil war free card. We don't have a divine protection for perpetual democracy. There's a risk, and you can start to see, it seems, really in the time that you were here at Monmouth. You were here for the 2016 election. This is probably the biggest thing that happened during your time here. Now, our political science department actually took polls, and maybe you remember participating in a poll, and the results of the poll were that there was substantial strength for both sides in our student body by itself. So every time we walk into class, or every time we walk into an auditorium together, we're sitting with our political opponents. So think about how we dealt with that. One way is you avoid politics, right? I mean, that's saved many a Thanksgiving, right, from many places. But another way that we dealt with it was that we practiced civil disagreement. And that is a good skill to take out of here with you. It's helpful when you're talking to your political opponents and you're thinking about them, it's helpful to think that there is no such thing as an unlimited good. Every good idea, every good value will eventually clash with another good value. And if you can think that way, then you can kind of understand where the other side is coming from. Another thing you can do is you can interrogate the sources of your information. It's more fun to interrogate the other guy's sources of information, right? I mean, that's much more fun. But interrogating one's own sources, that's sort of the challenge that you ought to live up to. When we look at our own sources, it tastes good to eat our own sources. It's like ice cream. Nobody wants to interrogate their ice cream. So it's hard to actually get in the mentality of doing that, but it's useful. It's useful if you can find your opponent's best source of information and add that to your reading list. Broaden yourself. You have skills that you learned here to distinguish what those things are. It's not an argument for being politically neutral. I wouldn't tell you to be. I'm not saying to withdraw from any political battle. It's an argument about how to do battle, about how to think of people who are maybe politically opposed to you, but are your fellow citizens. Assume their humanity, assume their patriotism, assume their good faith, because you would want them to do that for you. You would want them to assume those things about yourself. More important than trustees of the academy, you are trustees of democracy. So keep it healthy and pass it on. See if you can do better than my generation. Didn't do so hot. As for Monmouth, I refuse to say goodbye. I don't want to say make us proud, because you already have. I want you to keep in touch. I want you to drop us a line. All professors love to hear from their former students. You don't have to wait till your next big achievement to do it. Drop us a line anytime. Use this place. Take wedding photos if you get married. Bring your children and have picnics on the grounds. We have baseball. We have lacrosse. We got a lot of other stuff. You can duck into a gallery right in this room. We show operas. We show amazing movies. It's all for you forever. It belongs to you. It's your university. It's in your trust forever. Thank you.